Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Welcome to this afternoon's session on how leaders can drive innovation in government. My name is Joe Torgerson. I'm the head of innovation in the Civil Service Strategy Unit in Cabinet Office and led the design of last year's One Big Thing initiative. And I'm pleased to be joined by an excellent panel today. I'm going to be unpacking a range of themes from what a culture of innovation looks and feels like, with the systems, processes, behaviors behind that, all the way through to some practical advice for what leaders and managers can do to drive innovation in their teams. You know, innovation can mean very different things to very different people. If there's one thing that One Big Thing taught us, you know, it can be radical, it can be multi-billion-pound transformation programs, the invention of penicillin, but it can also be incremental. You know, teams trying small, calculated changes to improve the way that they work. I think today's conversation is going to be grounded in the latter, as we seek to explore how leaders drive that culture where people feel empowered to suggest new things, challenge each other, and take an idea through to implementation. And all of this nicely builds, of course, on One Big Thing, which many of you might have heard Kat Little mention this morning, which was our flagship exercise to upskill 500,000 people in the kind of core skills of innovation and really harness the creative potential of the civil service. In terms of structure, we've got about 50 minutes. I'm going to kick off with some opening remarks from each of our panel speakers for about 2 to 3 minutes. And then we're going to get into two themed questions and then Q&A, keen to make this as interactive as possible. So on to our expert panel. Emily Hobbs, so my first on my left, is the Director for Capability, Learning and Talent at the Department for Work and Pensions. And with experience in Cabinet Office and Department for Transport, Emily is now responsible for ensuring the department has the skills and capabilities it needs to deliver services to the citizens. Gareth Bristow is the Associate Director for the Disclosure and Barring Service. Gareth leads efforts to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of DBS, with a particular focus on continuous improvement and automation. Sapna Agrawal is the Director leading the Civil Service Strategy Unit in Cabinet Office, which owns the reform agenda for government. Formerly at McKinsey, Sapna has substantial insights into the decision-making process made at the heart of government. Jonathan Rushton is the Deputy Director at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, where he leads the team looking at driving an innovative culture and technology adoption. Prior to DCIT, Jonathan spent most of his career in the Home Office, looking at strategy, policy and implementation. And finally, Stephen Bediako is a partner at the For Government and Public Services at Deloitte. Stephen spent the last 15 years working in both the UK and the US, founding and delivering a number of innovative change programs, for which he was awarded an OBE for his contributions to innovation in social enterprise and philanthropy. So without further ado, we're going to get cracking. I'm going to pass over to Emily for our first kind of opening reflections on what this topic means to them. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Joe, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to start by saying a few words about a culture of psychological safety, because for me, a culture of psychological safety absolutely underpins a culture of innovation. And for me, you can't easily have one without the other. Now, the kind of idea of a culture of psychological safety is probably one that you're familiar with, but possibly more in a sort of space of inclusion or whistleblowing, where we talk about cultures that are safe to speak up and safe to challenge. But for me, it extends well beyond that. For instance, if we're looking to have a continuously learning culture, then we need environments where it's safe for people to make mistakes and to be open about those mistakes and to learn from them. And so for me, the same is true if we want to really drive a culture of innovation, because we need a culture that is safe for people to challenge, for people to take risks, for people to feel that they can put forward new ideas, and people can experiment without worrying that there will be repercussions, particularly if plans go wrong. So that culture of psychological safety, for me, is really important. And there are kind of four, I'm going off your practical edge today, Joe. There are sort of four things I would call out that leaders can do to just help create a culture of psychological safety. The first one is to talk about it. The first one is just to be really open that as a leader, you believe in driving this kind of culture. And it might not always be a reality, but to be really open that that is your ambition and that's how you want people to be. The second, though, as a leader, is to really, really think about your own behavior, because the first time that you kind of show frustration or have a bad day very openly, you've immediately undone your ambitions around psychological safety. So you do have to think about actually how are you supporting and bringing a positive mindset to your work in your teams. I think thirdly is to create really easy and safe spaces for feedback. So don't just assume that people will give you feedback. Actually make it really easy for people to give you feedback, whatever mechanisms they are, so that you can really understand what kind of culture is being created around you. And then the fourth thing for me is about courageous leadership. So I think as a leader, you really do always need to know, your teams need to know that you support them and that you have their backs. So if we are to have a culture of innovation and people are experimenting and people are taking slight risks, as the leader, you absolutely need to be supporting them and they need to know that. So those are four things that I would call out about creating a culture of psychological safety.
4 great tips. Thanks, Emily. Gareth?
Yeah, just building on that then. So at the Disclosure and Barring Service, we've hopefully implemented that a little bit, and how we've operationalised innovation, shall we say, is we've leaned into the staff. So we've created that safe space for them to come forward with the ideas. What we've done is we've recognised that the staff are the backbone of the organisation. We know that they're the guys that are working in these processes, working under these conditions daily, and they're often the ones that have got those fantastic ideas, but maybe don't feel empowered enough to come forward with those ideas for fear of being told that we can't do that because, or that's a silly idea, etc. So we've created a bit of a culture at the DBS, and we've done that by creating a structured area and team, if you like, where these individuals can come to us and feel safe to explore that idea. We've called that our innovation lab. We've done some very specific training with those individuals, and we've included about probably a couple of hundred staff now, which has gone up since One Big Thing training as well, where those individuals can get involved with the ideas. So we have a core group of individuals which creates that safe space where they can come forward and we can really work through those ideas. When we're working through those ideas, though, it's really important not to think about the challenges. And one of the phrases that we use at DBS is benefits before challenges. And what that really means to us is it's really easy to say we can't do something because. And what we hear a lot of times is, that's fantastic, but no, we can't do that because of X, Y, or Z. So we've banned that from the Innovation Lab. And the answer is, what's the benefits before we even think about challenges? And whenever somebody talks about the idea, we say yes and. So how can we make this reality? And what that does for us is it creates this this list of ideas that's potentially feasible, but that has birthed because we've absolutely got into the benefits of why we would do that in the first place. And once you've got to that place, you've got an idea with a shed load of benefits for the organisation. You've got a group of people that feel safe to promote that now because they understand how that's going to positively impact the organisation. And then we can start to look at delivery and stuff. So just building on that psychological safety piece, we've created that space for people to come and speak to us. And there's a couple of key catchphrases, I'm sure, that you can take away, hopefully.
I love that expression, benefits before challenges. Speaks to the mindset. Yep. Sapna.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joe. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of working with really senior leaders and ministers on innovation culture. And so when we think about innovation, we know, and behaviour change, we know that we need to make sure that we've got the right role models in place, that we've got the right skills to do what's being asked of us, that we have the right tools, and that we have the right incentives, and kind of all of those things obviously need to be in place in order to do to make behaviour change happen. And I think that what's really interesting for those of you who work in government and for those of you who are supporting government, obviously we have ministers setting direction and then civil servants delivering on that. And so it's really important for all of us to be in the same place on innovation and risk-taking. And what I thought was really powerful, in December, our most senior minister in the Cabinet Office, Pat McFadden, gave a speech about innovation culture, test and learn culture, and the PM and Pat McFadden also built on those speeches in the last few weeks, and I think there was a real call to arms and permission for civil servants to innovate, to be creative. And I think that for us to do that, we do need that kind of steer from from ministers as well as civil service leaders. So I thought that was really helpful, this sort of like call to arms to be entrepreneurial. And I know that many civil servants already feel incredibly entrepreneurial. And for those that don't, I think it was a real sort of moment to feel like we could take a step forward. And then just sort of how we can work to strengthen that relationship. Making sure that we're using the same language when we're talking about risk and opportunity, the opportunity cost of not doing something, how we can take a calculated risk, how we can show that we have done the analysis to quantify the impact of various options. We've understood the risks and we're still suggesting doing something. I think that is completely within stuff that some teams are doing every day already, but just making sure that we're using the right language, data, and creating a common way of talking about these things is really key. And I think the last thing that I'd say, Joe, is that we know that this is what civil servants want. They want their leaders to help them take risks. So we ran a data challenge actually with the Global Government Forum, and 75% of civil servants said that they wanted more support from leadership to pursue new ideas. And so we're really concentrating on that in the UK government. So as Joe mentioned, I think Kat mentioned in the opening today, we spent the last sort of year running One Big Thing, which was our flagship program. We get to sort of put out one thing that we want every civil servant to sort of pursue in the year, and last year's was on innovation. So we asked the entire civil service to do innovation training, have structured conversations in their team, get leaders really comfortable leading these types of conversations, and then experimenting and evaluating their efforts. And we got around 150,000 people involved. Thanks.
Thanks, Sabina. Yeah, definitely a lot of energy at every layer of the system to be thinking about this topic. Jonathan?
Great, thanks, Joe. I was just going to speak to, and it's come out there in the previous conversations, but an innovation mindset as an underpin for that broader innovation culture. So as as Kat Little was saying this morning, a lot of what we do fundamentally in government is around problem solving, whether that's the really big societal scale problems or the more local level challenges in terms of how we work together. And for me, innovation, a major part of it is saying no to the status quo if we can see a better way of doing something and an opportunity and the benefits there. And there's a really interesting connection there, as you touched on, Sapna, with the political appetite now for how we do that, and moving to that more sort of experimental approach to problem solving, and that test and learn methodology that's come out of the tech and the digital world, but has that broader application of starting small, thinking big, seeing if the idea actually works, and scaling it if it does, or learning from it if it doesn't. And we've seen applications of this already. There's some really interesting stuff coming out of the Government Communications Service, where they're applying a percentage of their budget to the more innovative approaches to doing their communications, and testing and learning whether those different approaches that haven't been tried before actually have a bigger impact. I know the Cabinet Office is thinking about working more locally with services and adopting that test and learn approach as well. And in DCIT, we're thinking about that in the context of AI as well. And fundamentally, it's about taking that experimental approach, and for me it's the idea that might fail, but it's not the person that had the idea that's failed. And I think that's really central to how we think about this and how we can drive that experimental culture.
Thanks, John. Completely agree with all that. Stephen, over to you.
Thanks, Joe. So my name's Stephen Bidiaco, and I come at this with a slightly more kind of entrepreneurial angle, having been an entrepreneur in the UK, building businesses, working with government around tackling social issues and using innovation. I then moved to California and built a co-op, which was working with low-wage workers to help them find quality work. And then I moved to New York and built a fund, which was investing in diverse social entrepreneurs. So definitely kind of bring a whole perspective to this, and really excited to be here with Deloitte, and we're really excited to be supporting this panel and this conference. And I think this is a really important moment, right? I think, using innovation can really help us to deliver this government's agenda, which is basically how do you grow the economy and how do you build a stronger and more cohesive society. But I think whenever you're using innovation, there's just like some steps that I always follow in whatever I've done. Firstly, it's just like defining the problem or the opportunity, and actually spending a lot of time kind of wallowing on that, polishing that stone, really understanding what's the opportunity you're trying to unlock or what's the problem you're trying to solve. I think you then need to define what you mean by innovation, right, in a particular context. Are you trying to build innovation capability within a team or an organization? Are you trying to do something innovative with the product or the services that you're offering to citizens? And do you want to do that innovation internally in the way that you work and the way you do things, or do you want to do it externally in partnership with others and maybe creating new ventures or whatever that might be? And I think for government in particularly, it's really understanding where you're innovating. Is that at the heart of civil service? Is that through broader departments? Or is that in relation to how we deliver and design services for citizens? And I guess just to say, on my journey, I've always thought about it in kind of, three ways, right? So one, how can you use innovation experts to come in and collaborate with you and team up and explore and do things? Another one is kind of how can you build new functions, new teams, new organizations that might potentially help you to innovate? And you can hear colleagues giving examples of that already. And then a third one is just like, where are the little tools or techniques that people can use in their everyday work, in passing, whatever it might be, in meetings, that can just help to generate and support innovation. So, yeah, we'll hopefully bring some interesting examples and stories that I've seen. But, I definitely feel like the world's changed. And, I think it was Einstein who said, the first sign of madness is doing the same thing again and again and hoping for a different result. So I think it's critical that at this moment, we embrace innovation and we really harness it to kind of help deliver those objectives of a growing economy and what I see as a stronger, more cohesive society. So, yeah, excited to be here and, yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Stephen. I think all those remarks set the scene brilliantly, and I'm sure a lot of people will be resonating with what's been said already. Now, the civil service can be quite a hierarchical place at times, and we ran a very similar session to this around this time last year for Innovation24. And the key theme that came up in that session was this term middle management permafrost, which inhibits good innovation. Now, Emily and Gareth, kind of putting your operational delivery hats on perhaps, is this something that you've seen in your civil service careers, and how do you think leaders can empower their managers to say yes more often than no to taking risks and trying new things?
Yeah, so I'm going to object slightly to the term permafrost, because I think actually, I think our middle managers have a really, really tricky job. So we do have a very hierarchical structure in the civil service, and there are people who, great managers who really do want to empower their teams, but they're working within a hierarchical structure and potentially don't necessarily feel that they themselves have the levers. And they are people who are empowering their teams, but they're also looking up at the hierarchy above them. And so I think can find themselves in a position that can feel quite constrained, even if that's not the intention of the environment that we have around them. So a couple of things. I think, first of all, we've often in the civil service viewed line management as something that you kind of do in addition to your sort of day job. We've not necessarily valued the real skill that there is in being a great line manager. So I think one thing is just really, really building great line manager skills, providing learning for line managers, giving them spaces to test and experiment with their own line management, to really build those skills of empowering the people around them. Last year, we published the new line manager standards across the civil service. That's a great place to start in really stepping back and taking a look at what does really great line management look like. And really great line managers can empower their teams. But I think also at more senior levels and through organisations, we need to think about the sort of structures and processes that we put around things and what we measure and what targets we set. So if we are giving line managers, particularly in an operational environment, performance targets that really drive them around a particular aspect of current delivery, then of course they will gear their teams towards that. We're not necessarily then giving them the space for experimentation. And of course we do need to measure delivery, measure success, but actually are we also thinking about the unintended consequences of that? And are we thinking about how can we also measure and reward experimentation and innovation? And I think yours was a great example around how actually do you provide the spaces that line managers can use to help their teams experiment, as well as delivering, particularly in difficult operational areas. So I pick out those two things. Let's think about, have we got constraining bureaucracy? And let's really build our line management skills.
Thanks, Emily. Gareth, anything to add?
I would say I have seen it. I would say that it's unfair to say that we've got a problem with it, because I do think we are tackling that in that culture of innovation that we're building. So I've actually seen it more in private sector. I think it's a bigger problem there than it is here. I was pleasantly surprised when I started in public sector sort of 4 years ago that people were willing to listen and explore new ideas. I think the way we have to tackle this, though, is we have to create that culture where it's okay for people above and below you to come up with a good idea. And the old saying, no idea is a bad idea. Sometimes they are, but it's working together with the entire hierarchy, if you like, to work out what the problem is. What's the idea or the opportunity trying to solve? And you mentioned it earlier, Stephen. That's for me is the big bit. If we get everybody involved in problem solving to start with and creating that problem statement, then we can start to look at the really wacky ideas about how we create a solution for it. Is it an innovative solution, etc.? So I think it is there slightly. It's through that culture of making it acceptable that everybody's got a place where they can come up with an opportunity or a better way of doing things, and we can say, actually, do you know what, that's possibly got legs. Let's discuss it like adults, and not just, no, I'm above you, I'll decide how we're going to do this, and let's put that idea down. So I think we can and I think we are tackling it through a culture shift where innovation's starting to become synonymous with doing things differently, and everybody feels empowered to do that.
Thanks, Gareth. Sapna, Jonathan, Stephen, we've touched on this already, and the One Big Thing initiative obviously emphasises the importance of psychological safety, where staff feel kind of encouraged and motivated to suggest new ideas. But how important is the role of a leader in creating that environment and not just incentivizing kind of innovation, but rewarding it as well? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm happy to go first. So, obviously, I think it's pivotal, and I think there's both kind of the leadership behaviours and the environment that you create, building on the last point, and then what you sort of reward, maintain in the team. And I was going to 4 things that I think are really important to me leading through this kind of change, but also doing myself and then rewarding in the team. So first of all, building on the sort of the psychological safety point, I think as a leader, you can put in kind of guardrails, principles for innovation, which sounds quite limiting already, but an environment to make it safe for people to experiment within. So at the start of the pandemic, I was involved in something called Meals for the NHS. So lots of a bunch of folk that were sort of tech entrepreneurs got together and tried to get hot meals to hospitals, and over time there was about 100 of us involved. Many of us had never met in person, and we had lots of like big ideas, big egos, lots of things floating around, and we needed a way to be able to experiment quickly and move together quickly. So what we did I think it was the first week or the second week, we came up with 6 principles of how we were going to operate. And one of them was to share everything, have zero ego. And the person that was the CEO over time of that really wonderfully modelled that that principle the entire time. So we were there was lots of people trying to do the same thing. There was times where we were all competing for the same sponsorship of various corporates, but actually he just like kept on encouraging us to keep to that one principle, and it really helped guide us. The second thing is to kind of be personally vulnerable, but then also demonstrate and support others being personally vulnerable. I try on away days or with my team to always talk about the things that I've mess up all the time, and sort of reflect what I did wrong, what I'd learned from it, and what I hope to do better in the future. And then I think the other thing is to kind of celebrate diversity of thought, but also as a leader bring in lots of other viewpoints in a non-threatening way. So how can we, and I think that that's probably one of my most important roles with my team, how can I help them look out, how can I connect them with others, and how can I support and reward my team for making those types of connections?
Thanks, Emma. Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. You covered a lot of ground there.
Sorry.
That's fantastic. I suppose the only build I'd add is the role of the leader in sort of creating that space for psychological safety. So we can get sort of stuck in the run-of-the-mill and the day-to-day and driving that delivery. But if we can create that space for that outside-the-box thinking and granting that permission until it's ingrained into the culture, then I think that can also help as well. I'll leave it there, Joe.
Stephen, anything to add?
Yeah, maybe just another example to kind of add to Sapna's example. So, recently worked with the National Lottery, who have built an innovation team. And again, I think lots of examples of leadership there, both starting at the top with the chief exec, who kind of, carved out the space, wanted to do innovation, was prepared to back it, even though didn't know necessarily how it would look and what it would turn out like, allocated resource, got in a team, a head of innovation, a program officer, and then really, and my role and our role in collaborating with them was also just looking at, okay, well, how do you get this going? How do you build some support for this? And what we did was actually just ran these workshops, open-ended workshops with the whole organization. People could turn up, there was some structure, but there were Miro boards, so you could add ideas before, during, or after the workshop. And the goal was to try and develop an innovation guide, so like a toolkit that would support everyone in the organization to innovate. And we ran these sessions, people contributed, and going back to this point about defining the problem, I remember there was one session when there was about 80 people, and there was clear consensus on like one of the big problems to try and solve. And so I think, that just really is an example of kind of leadership, creating space, allocating resource, empowering a team. But then I think what was really important to me was that it wasn't about trying to build an innovation team that sits over there doing innovation in a dark corner. It was actually about building a team that was working with the whole organization, unlocking people's ideas, enabling people to share, creating that safe space and that psychological safety that Emily talks about, and then allowing those ideas to bubble to the surface and to start to think about, okay, how do you implement these? How do you make them happen? And so I think that's been a great journey with the National Lottery. And, they're starting to kind of come out looking across the whole philanthropic sector and how they can support innovation across the piece. So, yeah, just an example there.
Thanks, everyone. Really, really interesting answers. I'm now very keen to kind of open up to the floor and make this as interactive as possible. So please do put your hand up if you have any questions. And I see one immediately there. And we'll get to as many as we can. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, so I'm Priyanka and I work for the Prison and Probation Service, and I've heard all of you mention innovation experts or almost like innovation consultants that sit in your innovation labs and kind of give advice on how you can innovate. But what actually makes, what skills and training does one need to become an innovation expert? Because it can be quite a broad term, and I think people always think digital, but it's not just digital, is it? It's much more than that.
Thank you. Excellent question. What are the top skills and behaviours for an innovator? Who wants to take that one first? Gareth.
Yeah, I don't mind. So we saw recently the One Big Thing training masterclass, and that was really helpful. It created that toolkit for a process, if you like. We did some training that I brought from public sector private sector into public sector, where there was some specific training techniques, tools that we used. Things like multiplication, division, these are all based in academia. So they are tools specifically to help you think differently. And those tools have been really helpful for us, where we've been looking at a process and, we're desperate just to continually improve that by making a small change here, where these tools allow us to think back and say, well, actually, if we had 2 of these processes, how would that benefit us? Or if this process didn't have the thing that made it the process and we subtracted that from it, how would you make that work? And what would be the benefit of making that work? So we had some specific training that we did prior to the One Big Thing piece that we put sort of 50 or 60 staff through. And for me, those tool sets that we created, for me, would be specifically make those individuals innovators, but that's nothing without the rest of the staff coming forward with the opportunities and the ideas, and we try and teach those people those techniques as well, and we help them through that process in our innovation lab. So I think there is some specific training you can do to help you think differently, but yeah, that was just sort of one example.
Thank you. Sapna.
Yeah, just to build on that. So, and I think that this goes for whether you're trying to innovate in a startup or you're trying to innovate in the heart of government. So, like, for me, the way I think about it is critical problem solving, as Stephen was saying, customer insight, like who's your customer and how are you going to go about understanding what they need, how they're going to interact with your product, what their problem is that you're trying to work with them on. There's some element of being able to do some like process redesign, like what's your existing process today and what are you trying to reinvent or tweak, and then how are you going to evaluate what you've done. But saying all of that, you don't have to be able to do all of that, right? Part of being an innovator might be spotting the problem and assembling the right team around you to be able to fix it. But I think just to build on what Stephen was saying earlier, like being able to assess your problem and really define it, and then working with others, come up with solutions. That's at the heart of the kind of the innovator's challenge. But then to bring it to life, you need to either be able to direct the change or get people around you that can help you do that.
Thanks, Amna. A quick plug for the Innovation Masterclass. It is still available on the Civil Service Learning. We had another question, I think just a woman in pink blazer. Yeah, thank you. Oh, can't hear it.
Hello. Hi, is that working? Esther Parker from Ministry of Defence. I work in business change. My question is, how do we create an innovative culture when it comes to environments where the pace of change is very, very slow? It can feel often very much like wading through treacle to get change realised in real life, particularly as well where there's a long time delay between the change itself and the impact it may have. Any tips, please?
Thank you. I think we'll take another question as well, just to start patching them up. Gentleman just to the side of you. Thank you.
Thank you for a great panel. In my first civil service job in 2017, 2019, I was in DCMS and I created an ideas panel which was inspired by what I once saw at an Air Force base in another country, where there was a great culture that everybody's very proud of having the right to create an idea. Anybody could create an idea on anything, from the janitor to the top general. And so innovation as an act of creation should stand separately from the hierarchy that constrains you. And I created a panel. We had volunteers, we had proposers. I'd match volunteers to proposers, and people would come with ideas. We'd have a structured approach, and then people could just implement it in the department. And the principle was that no good idea was too small. And so lots of little things, tech things, clubs were formed, events were created, different things happened. And it helped change the culture in DCMS at that time. So I was really happy when I saw One Big Thing coming along to do something very similar than civil service-wide. It's fantastic. The one concern that I have is that once this round of One Big Thing ends, what are you going to leave departments with? Because perhaps it's worth considering the types of best practice around innovation. There's plenty of departments that have departmental values, we're entrepreneurial, we're innovative, we're engaging, whatever. And it just becomes a slogan on the wall unless they also create a process and incentive and reward structure on that. So I was hoping that perhaps on the back of One Big Thing, you might consider some kind of handover with advice on departments. This is what you can do to continue this work forward and have a local culture of innovation. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Very pertinent question. So we've got two there. The first is on kind of dealing with innovation and incentivizing yourself when you can be bogged down with barriers, processes, time lag. And the second there about how do we sustain the legacy of One Big Thing in departments. Who wants to kind of have a crack at either of those?
I don't mind taking the first one because it's something we've dealt with a little bit. So for me, we absolutely have to focus on the benefits. So if you want to make change, and you want to make innovative change, it's got to be because of something. So I think with what you're describing there, you've probably got a slow delivery process, and it's quite choked up to get quick wins through it. Quite often, we found that by getting a lot of people involved to understand and get behind the benefits of doing something different, it creates that momentum, and actually it can overtake some of those things that are already in the delivery pipeline. And that's certainly how we've done it at the DBS. We've pushed forward some ideas that have previously been thought, no, maybe we shouldn't do this. But by getting the right people behind it to see the benefits and agree with the benefits of it, we've been able to push it forward really, really quickly. So hopefully that helps.
Can I ask you a follow-up? So if you're in that sort of situation, how... and I appreciate you're bringing people together. How do you keep sort of like people at the centre of it, like keeping the faith, given that it might take a long time to deliver?
It's difficult, but with the Innovation Lab, we've got a really wide demographic of individuals from across the organisation, and we get them all involved. So it might not be anything to do with your day job, the improvement idea. The solution might, it might never impact you, but by getting you involved in it, we end up with 20 or 30 people in the organisation who are all telling everybody else that this is a wonderful idea for the following reasons, and start to articulate the benefits for it, and that just drives massive momentum. And then when we get it through that delivery pipe, start to get it into that delivery pipeline, these people see the results of it, and they keep talking. So it's positive on top of positive on top of positive all the time.
I'll jump in, yeah, please. I think the first thing I'd say really is that, we are all innovators, like we're innovating every day in our work, in our personal lives. And, it's just important to remember that. I mean, you can probably tell I'm a big fan, and, part of joining Deloitte has been really exciting in that I think that, some of us have got things that we're focused on, we're delivering, and actually the importance of having experts or people that are holding the baby, so to speak, on the innovation piece can be really helpful, right? And then being able to tap into them and pull them and learn. And, I'm quite new at Deloitte. I've just been in post for the last 2 or 3 months, but I'm learning about all the work we're doing. And one of the most fascinating things that I've seen is that we have this partnership with McLaren, right? Like, Formula One company, incredible, wasn't doing too well until recently, but suddenly doing really, really well. And part of that has just been how they have driven a culture of innovation in the way that they work, and just like constantly reviewing the car, constantly looking at changing parts. Apparently something like, by the end of every 6 weeks, 20,000 parts are obsolete because they're constantly running simulations, analyzing data, looking at ways of changing things. And I think, I don't know much, but what we are doing is kind of helping to do a lot of that analysis, a lot of that support alongside the team that are obviously focused on building the car, getting it out and delivering. And there's lots of analogies, I think, with how public services work, with how organizations work. So I guess that's all just to say that I think, even if you're working in a space where things are moving slow, there's stuff to get through, there's policy, there's stuff that needs sign off. I think if you've always got a team somewhere that isn't caught up in BAU, constantly thinking, constantly iterating, and then that team has a really solid connection to the organization and is sharing and informing, that could be a really powerful way to work and to get innovation into what you do.
Thanks, Stephen. Emily, Jonathan, you are both One Big Thing champions for your department. I'm going to put you on the spot and just one of you kind of give a bit of a reflection on how you're planning to sustain kind of the energy that was in the department.
I'll go first and then hand over to you, Jonathan.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, the one big thing. One big thing has been really great. One big thing last year on data was, and this year on innovation, and actually it has tied together for us in really quite a nice narrative across the organisation around this moment around learning, but that I think of itself has kind of keeps the conversation going and has kept, has itself kept its sort of momentum. The really, really great thing this year about One Big Thing was that, as well as the learning that people did, gathering in the case studies has given us as a department some data around little small experiments that had happened all over the organisation that actually we can bring together and have a look at and just see actually is there potential for wider growth. So one of the biggest challenges for us, if you like, with One Big Thing, with every team potentially innovating, is that over a huge organisation of 80,000 people, that is actually a huge amount of innovative activity. How do you call out actually what is in there that's at such a volume? How do you call out what's really got potential? So looking at those cases, particularly in the digital space, because we're doing lots of digital transformation in the department, and we've got lots of big programs to drive digital transformation. Sometimes there could be really, really small answers to quite difficult questions, and those are ones that are people who are working with the public, our work coaches. They're the ideas that they see every day. So One Big Thing has it has really provided that mechanism that we didn't have previously for surfacing that. So looking at those case studies, using the platform to take those forward. We do as well, as other organisations do, have a kind of Bright Ideas platform. We had things already. I think One Big Thing has really given that some impetus. But I think also to your point around, is there something civil service wide, a sort of toolkit? So my instinct would be that actually how you take this forward is potentially different in different organisations. DWP as a massive operational organisation is very different to a small policy department. And actually, I think the most important thing is that departments kind of take the opportunity offered by One Big Thing and think for themselves, how can we sustain that in our kind of own context? So that's what we're doing. Jonathan.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, like the colleague from DCMS, and it sounds like you, Emily, as well, we'd initially run an ideas lab process in DCIT ahead of One Big Thing, and then obviously One Big Thing kind of came on the back of that and provided a cross-government forum for ideas and kind of the implementation of those. I will just at that point give a shout out, if colleagues from my team are in the room, I can't see, but we had a brilliant idea from our Ideas Lab process originally, which was the creation of an innovation hub. So shout out to Sean and Claire if they are in the audience for bringing that to life. I think the main, as part of One Big Thing, we've also, as colleagues have spoken, brought to life an innovation toolkit that we had in the department. So that's part of our kind of legacy as well in terms of putting tools in the hands of staff. I think the really hard thing actually in this is the piece around how do you select the ideas that you want to put the implementation behind, and how do you wrap the implementation structures that are required around that. There's different models for doing it. Gareth, it sounds like you've got a pretty mature innovation lab, which I'd love to hear more about perhaps after this. There's an innovation squad model where you bring a multifunctional team around a particular problem short term and tackle that problem in that way. We're thinking about different models, to be honest, about how to bring to actually implement the ideas, and we're also thinking about the technology piece in that as well. So the sort of automation and AI angle, and how does that play a part in sort of problem solving that we need to go after.
Thanks, Sean. One more, and then we're going to open up to questions.
So I just wanted to flag for those of you who are civil servants, do look out. Last week, the PM launched an AI innovation competition. So if you've got a great idea, please put your idea forward. We'll be able to get the number 10 innovation fellows, some AI support, some data science support to support you in delivering that idea. So please do get your ideas in.
Yeah. I think the important thing to flag on legacy is that we don't want civil servants to feel that they're no longer being encouraged and supported to try new things now that the One Big Thing window is closed. And so that, I think, is a really important cultural thing that departments need to be landing. another round of questions. I'll try and take 2 or 3. We've got ones, I think a couple grouped over there, just on the left-hand side. And then we'll try and come to this side of the room. Do you want to keep your hands raised, if possible? Yeah, gentleman at the front. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Louis from NSNI. My focus is on the employee experience. In my research interviews with some colleagues, mainly line managers, most of them are so focused on delivery that they don't have the mindset, not let alone the time, to try to innovate in what they're doing. And especially when the organization is going through a lot of transformations and plans going ahead, it becomes not only the toolkit, while the innovation masterclass was helpful in terms of toolkits, but in actual implementation, it becomes a burden because it's being looked at as something in addition to what they do rather than part of what they do. How do you tackle that?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I think there was a couple of questions just behind at the back. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, actually a really similar question. So when I asked a few of my colleagues, I work in the Intellectual Property Office as an analyst, and when I asked a few of my colleagues if they would fancy coming along to this, they said, I haven't really got time. And we're in the middle of a big digital transformation program. It's all about delivery. People don't feel there is room in their weekly timetable for anything like this. So what can we do when people are so delivery focused to carve out time, or to say to people they can step away from the kind of coal face of delivery and actually do something which in the end may actually improve what we deliver?
Thank you. And I think we had one last question just at the back there, and I'll take all 3. Gentleman in the middle.
Hi there. So my name's Lachlan and I work in the job centre. So I'm a work coach in the job centre. I think my question is, if you felt like something had been shut down, so you've come up with an idea, you've got the benefits for it, you've got the idea for it, you know what you want, and it gets shut down at management, what do you do then?
Yeah.
Where do I go? That's kind of my question.
Perfect. Thank you. So to kind of digest those first 2 questions, how do we make sure that an idea doesn't just become a side of the desk initiative that inevitably is going to get crowded out by our urgent work? How do leaders carve out the time for proper innovation? And then if you feel like you have a good idea but it's getting blocked at that managerial stage, where do you go? Kind of what are your routes for escalating that, or do you just move on? Who wants to have a crack at those?
I don't mind. I think first off, we have a lot of this across government. There's lots of campaigns, there's lots of requests for people's times for certain things. One of the things we did at Disclosure and Barn Service was a prioritisation. So we looked at everything that we were asking these individuals to do in their side of their desk, on top of their day job. And then we prioritised it. We looked at it and said, what is the most important thing for us? Because quite often, these things just get added to the back and added to the back and added to the back. So I think in the first case, it's a prioritisation exercise to make sure that we're all focused on the right things, so we can make the time to do that. In terms of the question at the back there, I think it's really important that you're involved in that decision making. So if you've got a process at the moment where you're bringing forward ideas that you firmly believe in, you believe there's benefits there, you should also be involved in the feasibility discussion of that. And if you're not, I would suggest you have to be, because otherwise we end up with a lot of people who are not disengaged, if you like, with the whole process. So I think it's really important that if you're coming up with those ideas, you're part of that feasibility piece on it, so that you fully understand why something may not go ahead in the future.
Emily?
Yeah, so I mean, those are both really good questions, because some of this is, it's not easy, is it? Some of this is tricky, and particularly when we're all really, really busy. There is something, I completely agree with the points about prioritisation. I think there's also something about a bit of a mindset shift. And it's similar to conversations that I have in the learning space, in terms of often people find that they don't have time to take part in learning, that sort of space. And actually, when we're doing our prioritization, we also need to be thinking about things that are an investment for the longer term, as well as immediate day-to-day business deliverables. And investment in the longer term is things like investing in innovation, is experimentation, is investing in learning. And there's just something about in that prioritization, making sure we are putting enough weight on that longer term investment as well as immediate business deliverables. And it does come back to leaders and managers in the organisation giving the permission for that prioritisation on a slightly broader scale than your immediate business deliverables. And to the point as well about where do you go if your manager says no, I think there is something about absolutely understanding why. Because understanding why can really help us know what it was about that idea, that actually maybe it's not the right moment, maybe it's too big and it needs scaling down, maybe the risks are too great, that may then help us reshape it, think about it in a different way. But I think to your point, being absolutely involved in understanding why did that idea not float at that particular time.
Thank you. Stephen?
Yeah, no, great questions. And I think just on the first question, I think it's very much about problem definition, like what kind of problem are you trying to solve? And, I think we need to be always thinking about, trying to get problems that are prioritized and that really hit the button for as many stakeholders as possible, but are also like business critical, right? Maybe not pet projects and whatnot, but I think really homing in on a problem and then actually connecting to the second point in terms of if something's been rejected and how do you maybe get support for it. Again, I think there's this bit about critical mass. Like, are you able to kind of build a critical mass of support for your idea and for what you're trying to do? And, trying to smash the hierarchies on that if possible, right? If you've got the space to do it, to get that critical mass support for what it is you're doing. Another example, just to try and bring it to life, and, there's colleagues here from the centre of government who might be able to support it, but when I was in the US, Bloomberg Philanthropies did some really interesting work around helping to create innovation teams in government across the country, particularly regional government and kind of on the front lines. And they did that by kind of, getting people to write in with the challenges, really thinking about how they want to solve them, and then kind of running a challenge competition to set up I-teams or to fund kind of, innovation roles within those departments to look at those challenges and to try and solve them. So I think there's definitely something about, whether it's, next big thing or whatever, could this government be providing some kind of central support to just allow anyone, anywhere, at any time, explore the problems that they're trying to solve and how they might use innovation to solve them. So yeah.
Thanks, Stephen. I think we've covered a lot of ground there, and we are at time. So I think just to kind of summarize some top reflections, I think, as Sapna said, this really is a top priority at every stage of government. Leaders have a responsibility now to take that kind of mandate from ministers and really distill that throughout the organization. We talked about structures, we talked about processes, how psychological safety, empowerment, this needs to be instilled in the kind of the basic hygiene of good line management. And leaders have that responsibility to help their teams cut through the noise, cut through the difficulties in getting something done in government. And I like the idea of kind of setting the guardrails, being clear on the risk appetite for your team, and then role modeling the behaviors that you want to see. So I think there's lots for us all to take away from that session. Do catch the speakers in the margins if you have follow-up questions. But otherwise, let's put our hands together to say thank you very much for our speakers.